Hey everyone, before we kick this episode off, I urge everyone listening to like and subscribe to our podcast, wherever you may get your podcast from. So if you listen to us on iTunes, please give us a 5-star rating, or also subscribe to us on Spotify. And I urge all of our listeners to head to our website, and you can get more than just our podcast from there. We have news stories all the time there. We have feature articles there. So head to tnpmedia.au. That's tnpmedia.au. All right, without further ado, we'll get stuck into the podcast.
Talk and Power, your motorsport and motoring radio show. Now on 88.5 FM, The Valley Comes Alive. And podcasting across iTunes and talkandpower.com.au.
This is episode 216 of the Talk and Power podcast, and after quite a few episodes, I must say, we have a guest on the podcast. I'll introduce co-host over here, Simon Gonzo Travellini there, Michelle Morrison over there. How are you, Michelle?
Doing well.
And over here, we have from NDRC and all different sorts of things we're going to find out tonight, Wade Aunger. Thank you for joining us, Wade.
Thank you for letting me be a guest. How many episodes now?
216.
Holy cow.
Yeah, I know. Most people quit at 10.
Just to prove that the first 215 are not a fluke, you've gone again. I like that.
That's exactly right. So, no, thanks for joining us. It's great to have you here. And we are trying out a new studio, so I hope the guys at Henhouse aren't listening.
You know, just so you know, we started in one of the bedrooms at his house.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was hard to get all four people in.
But we've gone full circle. We started in Balcatta.
And we're back.
And we're back in Balcatta.
The hoon capital of the world.
We are. They've gone full circle. We are in the studio of Emerald Room in Balcatta. So thanks to the guys at
It's
Emerald
a cool
Room.
building.
Yeah,
Some
it
great
is.
bands recording.
Yeah, no.
There's some thrash and some punk. And
A bit of everything happening.
I was involved in, my mate Brad Steele and we had a video company that filmed Speedway, Rapid Images, in number 3 Glentworth Avenue, Chewett Hill, in his spare bedroom. So
Glentworth Avenue. My friend used to live on Glentworth Avenue.
Really?
Yeah, in Chewett Hill.
yeah, good
Yeah.
little spot. I wouldn't mind owning a house there now.
Oh, yeah.
Be worth some coin.
Chewett Hill used to be the media capital of Western Australia.
Well, it's funny you say that because I think, isn't Mount Yokine like right near there as well? Because I grew up in a house right next to Channel 9 in Mount Yokine.
There you go.
So the first 6 years of my life were in Mount Yokine.
Mm. Yeah, no, it was the media. Very good. Even
Yeah.
Channel 10 had a stint
They're
there
all
as
there.
well. Yeah.
Saturday mornings when I was working for Con at Claremont Speedway, I would take a Super VHS tape to all the TV networks, to Ian Brayshaw, to Chris Young, gosh, I'm trying to think who we dealt with at Channel 9 back in the day, and I would give them the tapes, and they would dub the tape off of the Speedway crashes from the night before, and you could drive around within the space of 500 metres to all the
Yeah.
different TV networks.
Ian Brayshaw, for the younger generation that are listening, grandfather to Andy from the Dockers.
Yes. And James, of course, and
Yeah, James.
Sticks is such a lovely man.
Yeah.
He's just a really lovely man. We would ring up, I think his number was like 9445 I think was the newsroom number. And I'd say, Wade, Sticks, it's Wade Aunger. You go, how you going, Wade? Good, thanks. I've got a couple of good crashes for you. I've got a good story for you. Oh, yeah? Tell us about it. Send us over a fax. A fax. He was a lovely, lovely man. I worked at Channel 7 for 2 or 3 years doing the Speedway reports on 7 Nightly News and got to work with Dennis Cometti.
Yeah.
When I say I got to work with, I was in the same room.
He's a legend.
Oh my God, he's my broadcasting hero.
Yeah.
So good with the chosen word, and
But he's just a really nice person as well. You know, he doesn't have any, just talks to you like a normal guy.
Wade, would you know of our the slogan, the bicycle safety slogan that went around WA recently?
No.
It was in recent years, and it was marketed as "could be committee"
Oh,
because
yes.
he's so
yes.
into his biking, and so
Yeah.
it was like it could be
That's
committee.
right.
Yeah.
Just knowing how
Yeah.
well loved he is throughout Perth, and so
Yeah.
it's,
It's an icon.
He's also very fair when he commentates.
Yeah. Remember when Peter Wilson scored that goal over his shoulder in the goal square, and Dennis Cometti's like, "Oh my word, Peter Wilson, like a cork in the ocean." He always just had this phenomenal way of centimetre perfect and all those incredible sayings he coined.
But so do you as well. That's part of my spill tonight. But so do you. I think you have a way of, putting like you have your little sayings. That I haven't got one here, but
God, thank
you've-
God you haven't got none.
no, but you come up with some really good ones as well. Do you prepare for those?
No.
Or you just
No.
they're off the cuff, really? Because they're pretty cool for off the cuff.
I'm glad that you think that they sound like I've thought about anything that I say before I say it.
Are they all a surprise?
I'm
or-
what you call a lazy announcer compared to, say, Nolte. Matt is so diligent with his prep and with his, statistical information and all that stuff. Whereas I prefer to talk to Michelle about, Trent and her father-in-law and the two girls and the family, the flesh and blood component of it. Because I'm just not a mechanically minded person and I don't pretend that I am. But that's why I have to go to every field team, every door slammer team, every funny car team after every run and say, what just happened? And then I'll say, oh, we overpowered the racetrack. Tell me what you mean by that.
Yeah.
Because we can't rely on everybody always knowing what you mean when you talk about clutch settings and what happened at the 60 foot and turning the tires and or putting a hole out or any of those sort of things. So I have to get that explained to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm more just reacting to the humanity of the sport when I just spoke to Phil Reed.
Yeah, Felipe.
Well,
Felipe.
I mean, he's such a great guy. I'm so in love with this sport again. And, years ago I announced it, in 2000 on Speed Week, on SBS Speedway. Yep. Nathan Prendergast was the guy that pushed me to do that. He's like, you got to call more than Speedway. I said, I don't like anything but Speedway. He's like, no, you've got to do more stuff. I'm like, but like what? He goes, drags. I don't know drags. And to be quite honest, drag racing fans are so specific about their passion for the sport. It's all 60 foot. It's all mine shaft conditions. It's all that incredible in-speak that you have as an industry that is quite daunting when you first call it.
I think for the rusted on fans, yeah, potentially, but for the younger kids that are coming into the sport, I think you give them something, and their parents as well. You give them something to analyze and something to think about that might not be necessarily technical. So it is like, I know your relationship even with Sarah Lamartina. I think that works really well, because for new people to the sport, they don't know Sarah. They don't know the other Phil as well, Phil Lamartina. So I think what you do there is really good.
Thank you.
I think you bring another element to the sport that it hasn't had previously. Really,
no, that's right.
When you think about it, it's not.
And this is the success of shows like Street Outlaws, is that they have that human element.
Look, and I think one of the saddest things that's happened in drag racing was losing Sam Fennick. And yet it galvanized the industry at a time that it probably needed it more than it realized. So to be in around, and I was relatively new to the NDRC thing, but it was just Top Fuel Australia then. It wasn't NDRC.
Yeah.
But that Sam's passing was almost what drove Nathan and Andy Lopez to go, we need to create a one force, one direction concept. So that, I think, and I had that profound experience with Sam the day before, meeting him just once, and I've known Fab forever, and he's always just you know what he's like. He's such a wise cracker, and he'll always just swear at you and call you a Ford loving, whatevers, and so you expect that banter. But then to meet Sam at Willowbank, the day before he lost his life, and say to him, "Hey mate, I'll be back in a sec. I'll have a macchiato, thanks." Just joking. And I came back 45 minutes later and he stopped what he was doing with the data download and he just made me this amazing espresso coffee. Said, that should be good enough for you, mate. Is that okay? And a big smile. And I was like, what a person this person is. To stop what he was doing. They had that brand new car. They couldn't sort it out. He had all sorts of things going on. So I had this really incredible moment in that moment with Sam where I went, this is a really special person. So tragically to lose him, 36 hours later, I still had a really strong heart-to-heart, flesh and blood connection with a guy that was a stranger before that. So I'm a storyteller more than I'm an announcer, and I love the sport. I love the people. So to meet Sam and have that moment, and Lounsey was in that car, only an hour before, and Sam's there with Fab, and they're wah, 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 and Craig Lowndes is like, wow. I'm just standing going, isn't it incredible how they just sit there with 1,000 horsepower in front of them or 11,000 horsepower and do 400 kilometers per hour or 500 kilometers per hour and just go, that wasn't bad. Whereas I come from the outside of it going, you don't understand when you're sitting there starting up a fuel car, it's like, bah, 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 and everyone's got oxygen masks on, and there's Mum, there's Sarah just standing there like, la, 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 and the kids are standing there with their little earphones. You go, that's not normal. It's not normal, Gons. You know it's not.
It is to us.
But it's not normal to the outside world. And I took some friends, a number of people to the Nitro Champs who'd never been before. I said, you got to see it. Because I'm still that new guy going, you got to see this. They're doing 500 kilometers per hour and they're doing 0 to 60. And it's
You
just
can
like,
feel it in your belly.
yeah, like it'll knock you over when you feel this and come down to the start line. And so, but it's that human. When I take him to meet Newbie, and I take him to meet Lisa Gregorini, and I take him to meet Russell, and then Zap, and then I go to take him to Damian Harris, and they're all so different.
Yeah.
They're such beautifully different, complex people with that same passion, and that's what I love about it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so human.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've been talking a lot about how we think that the races really need to be just a high focus to be promoted rather than just keeping the attention on the cars and just the racing and mechanics specifics. And so that's what I really love about you, Wade, the storytelling side, and really giving the spectators and fans that insider experience to get to know the races better.
Oh, thanks, love. I worry about that, to be honest. I don't have the credibility as a drag racing announcer, and I don't pretend that I am one. I just more love the hype. I love that when you guys come down the return road when Kyle Putland, won the B final and he's sitting up in the seat and the whole crowd's up on their feet. And so I love the euphoria of it. And that's what I think I love when I watch what the wives are doing. I just can't believe the wives or the husbands in your case that will back up their partner, stand to the side and watch them do 500 kilometers per hour in 3.68 seconds and go back and say, good job, babe. You know what I mean? Like,
Isn't it crazy? It's just and having it come from you, who you're saying it was only a few years that you've been introduced to the sport, and to think of something that's just been the norm for us, and like I suppose when you do really think about it like that, and Trent straps me in and pulls down on my belts and is like, you good? Like, yep, good, and just having someone look at that from the outside and just
well, he does his
thinking
little
like,
leg
wow.
kick. How he does his kick when you leave the line and stuff. And it's a remarkable sport. It is such a Colosseum thing. It's really, and we got to stop trying. I got to catch myself sometimes because I was like, come on, Zap, don't just say the Fuchs, Stenani, Monaro. Tell me about what's going on for you. But he's such a scientist that's all he's focused on. He's like, oh, well, it didn't shift into fifth properly, and I've still got that problem with the gearbox, and I can't get and it's like, dude, you just did, despite all that, you still ran like a 561 or something like that, and he's disappointed. And you go, you just don't understand. The thing did this the whole way down the track, and he's disappointed, or he's wondering what's Russell doing, but you can't take those unique personalities out of it either. I love that Russell Taylor gives you nothing.
I was just about, you're reading my mind. I was about to say that Russell, but I've seen Russell morph with you. I've seen him. He's giving you a lot more than what he previously did.
Is really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just about to say.
Do you remember at Street Outlaws? I don't know if you were there on the Friday when
No, not on the Friday.
He rolled the car.
Yeah.
And, mate, I wish someone had a camera because he got out of that car. He was pumped. And he was pumped for the whole weekend. I would be crying, going, how am I going to fix this?
Yeah.
He's in there, and you're the one that dragged him out of there.
It is what he always says. It is what it is. It is. He's got those crystal blue eyes, and he imports the iced coffee everywhere he goes. And Zap says, oh, he bought a very good car, and he drives it pretty good. Mate, he won his championship in his rookie year.
Yeah.
You tell me what other form of motorsport when you've got icons like John Zapier and Daniel Gregorini and Peter Kapiris and those guys in that class.
Yeah.
But see, Dorstamer is so awesome. Lisa Gregorini, like, in what other form of sport in any galaxy do you have a woman, no disrespect, I didn't mean to say that the way it sounded, who's only ever driven a Toyota Kluger, is now running a Camaro in the 560s, second in the championship in her second year, and beating her husband who's been doing it for seems like forever.
Yeah.
You know, with an all-girl team. And then you got Russell, who's just like, yeah, it is what it is. And you got Ronnie Palumbo, who's like the king of the tree. You got Zap, who's an 11-time champ in his 60s. You got Brody, he's like his teenage nephew. It's like, dude, it's such a great theatre, despite what the
Yeah.
cars do.
Yeah.
And that's the thing though. That's all the back end stories.
Yeah.
You know, and I think for you, you know, you're building that you're building sorry.
That's right.
You're building that excitement up with the crowd. And realistically, you know, if you try and break down the demographic of who's in the crowd, of who's really going to be understanding those mechanical like fine increments.
Yep.
You know, they just want to be living that excitement with you and with the races. And if they see an emotion on the track, that then they see it
Yeah,
from
translates.
whether it's your crew guys on the track, Trent.
Yeah.
You know, they can then build it from yourself and others in the commentary box, and like that drives their entertainment as well.
Yeah.
You know, if you were just to be given stats and
Yeah.
explanations of what's happening, it will only go in the ears of so many, and there'll be a lot more that I would personally think that it would just go straight over their heads.
When we go to Darwin, they're a supercar crowd that have been kind of drinking all day. But the supercar broadcast audio, we use the supercar equipment, right? So you can hear, Nolte and I commentate past the finish line. The commentary box is past the finish line. So it's one of the few places where you get the shock and awe in the commentary of, you don't normally, you know, when Kelvin Lyon went past us with no brakes and the chute's not out and unconscious and just went past us, those kind of things really shock you. But you can hear the buzz of the crowd in our headset. So even when there's nothing going on, you can just hear. And I said to the guys, the diehard drag racing people, you could take the numbers off the board in Darwin.
Yeah.
You could. And just have a win light because they don't care.
I think you could do that globally.
Yeah.
I think that's probably it's a race. It's become a race to the bottom, and that's part of the problem with the sport. Is, you know, it's about that number. And I'll tell you now, if anyone could tell the difference between a 6.0 and a 5.7 without the scoreboard, I'd be shocked because I don't think you can.
I know that a huge part of the sport hangs on those numbers. Massive. And if I was to tell anyone it's not important, then I might as well quit now because it is. And because drivers will be able to tell you their PB and their ET before they could tell you their wedding anniversary.
Yeah.
Like that's the way what's your ET? Oh, it's 579 at 283. They'll just roll it off like that, right? It should be a tattoo. But it's also limiting.
Yeah.
Because like now Damien ran at 368 and did it twice. So what are we assuming that there'll be a 364 at some point soon?
Yeah.
Whereas 6 months ago, when Phil Reed ran a 372, we went, "Oh my God,
Yep.
How's that even possible?" But Zap still has a 558 on the blower, and he ran a 559 at Nitro Champs. But is that 558 going to be there forever? And does it matter?
Yeah.
It matters to John a lot.
Yeah.
Right? But does it matter to the public? They want to see side by side.
Yeah.
Unless I'm wrong.
Well, when Peter went 6.01, they had to stop racing for about 5 minutes.
03, I think.
6.03,
Yeah.
6.03.
Yeah.
You know, it was a big deal. But then it was how many years until Zap ran the 5? It
So
was,
I seem to remember that was 03 when Pete did that.
20 years ago on September 18, Peter Pike told me. It's the 20-year anniversary coming up for that. The Dino's Cranes Bounty.
Oh, was it 20? So it was 2005 then. All right.
Correct.
so it was another 2 years before the 6 flat barrier got broken.
Yeah.
I actually have that on video somewhere. That 03. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
I love it. It's a balance. It's definitely a balance. I need someone alongside me like Nolte, right? Or Critchell or someone like that, you know, in Sydney or at Willowbank. I need that guy that actually really loves that technical aspect of it because you still need that, right? I just get so caught up in what I see people that I really respect and love as people doing superhuman things. And I get a bit caught up. It's like when Damo Muscat, like what a great example of Muscat.
Yeah.
Like, and Benny One Ball, like how good is Benny Stevens? Like he's such a great entertainer. You know, like on the
Yeah.
back wheel. Watch this, folks, on the back wheel the whole way. And you can see the people. And then when his leg came off at the Winter Nationals
Yeah,
last year,
yeah.
I was like, kids, it's okay. It's an
Yeah.
artificial leg.
Yeah.
But that's what. But I think I'm gonna keep going back to. I think that's what the sport needs as well. And this is why I want to. I don't want to augur in supercars, but I will just momentarily. I think at the moment we don't want to be critical of supercars, but the Mark Scaife and Neil Crompton duo is not working because they're not bringing those stories in. If you listen to their commentary, it is purely technical now. and it's
100%.
it's so clinical, and they don't have that guy. They don't have Mike Raymond.
Yeah.
They don't have the Mike
Yeah.
Raymond next to him. That's bringing.
Well, they
in
got Matt Nolte, they got Chad Nailon, they got Garth Tander, they got Craig Lowndes. They're all right there. They're just not in the chair,
yeah,
right, for
yeah.
the main
Yeah.
game. I think those guys are Chad and Matt are
Excellent.
phenomenal announcers. And with Garth and Lowndesy, the runs are on the board. I really like Neil. I'm a big fan of Neil Crompton. I think he's genuinely a good guy. I struggle to relate to Mark because I was never a Ford guy. I never a Holden guy. I was never the super thing.
I never understood why he was there.
Well, I'm pretty sure he's a significant shareholder in supercars as well. So I think he's.
Well, wouldn't
very
you want
much-
to get good investment, good return on your investment?
You and I might think that way, Gonz. Hi, Mark, if you're watching.
But yeah, look, I mean, that's why I think. So that's why I think we've gone a few leaps and bounds in recent years, especially NDRC. I think all that auguring in together has really helped, and I think the work that you've done is really amazing in that front.
Well, we had to thank you for saying that, and thank you, Michelle, because I know you've been really amazingly supportive to me, behind the scenes as well. I remember Darwin 3 years ago, and Chad Nailon interviewed Bruce Reed after one of Phil's runs, and I was like, "What do you reckon of that, Bruce?" And Bruce said, "Oh God, we're going to get beaten up on that one. These boys behind us are going to just make that look pretty average." And he was right. Okay, he was talking purely from his own performance and what he expected of their team and their race car. So what he said was spot on. But I said, Phil, everyone in the crowd went, "Oh, so that wasn't any good."
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like, you know what? That was good, but I tell you what, we're going to go better next run. You just watch.
Yeah.
So I went and had a chat with I said to Andy Lopez and Nath, can I just talk to the guys and say, can we talk positively, and how good was that, fans? And can we just raise our own thing without the level of, oh my God, that was, because Bruce was right. He was unhappy with the run. I don't want him to say, oh, that was great when they ran a 420.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a balance, right? And Bruce got it because they think about the sport a lot, Bruce and Phil. And they come from that old school thing through their dad, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But we've just got to start saying, did you see that where that thing left? Like, that was amazing. We had half track. I think we were going to do something incredible just then. I reckon we're close.
But
Yeah.
I think even if, like, I've seen Top Fuel now a lot, like the engine eats itself up, and there's like
Yep.
stuff going everywhere. There's rods everywhere, and there's like a nuclear explosion, and they talk that up now as well. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like there's a $60,000 investment that's just gone up in smoke and fire, but I think they talk that up now as well. I've seen, so I think they've taken heed there. I think some of the drivers and some of the crew chiefs have taken that on board and even talked massive explosions up as well. We don't want to see it, of course.
No.
But it's part of the sport, and they say, well, yeah, that one's gone, but we've got another one in the trailer, and we'll stick it in and go from there.
It's like about what the spectators are actually seeing, and then what you add to that with your comments afterwards. And it's like, I've said to you boys before, with someone would say, I've done a great pass and everything's gone well. I haven't won the race, and the spectators have all known that because of Trent's reaction on the start line. and it might say that I've broken out, but then everyone says to me, "Oh, I knew that you must have had a bad reaction time because of Trent's reaction that he's then displayed to all the spectators in the stand."
That's the story.
Yeah.
Like, her husband is the guy, and he's sending his blonde bombshell, sorry to use that term, wife out to do incredible things. So he's going to be doing it if he wasn't helping anyway. But that's the story, right? And then there's his dad as well that's in the game. Then there's the little girls around it. Like, boy, they're sassy. Her little one just will not let me off the hook.
Oh, don't worry. She's chasing Nick for a pineapple now. Now that she lost a tooth recently, and,
Oh, wow.
and
It's
Nick
worth a
asked
50
whether
now?
she. Well, yeah. Nick asked whether she got a pineapple, and she says, "Not a pineapple. The tooth fairy gives money."
Wow, that's an inflation. $50.
So I'm up for a fitty on that one.
Wow.
Yeah, that
I was actually
actually
I was gonna pay up tonight, but I forgot. So.
that was my
Does she
bribe
take
to her.
FBOS?
So, yeah. Knowing her, she,
There's a really
she'd walk
funny
you to the ATM.
there's a really funny video that's Michelle has sent me. It's quite hilarious. My wife loved it, but yeah,
A pineapple?
She goes, a pineapple? Why would I get a pineapple for?
That's silly, Nick.
Pineapple's a fruit.
Well, I got a similar story to that with Muscat, with Brodie Pilkington being the tuner on the Top Fuel motorcycle and also on the funny car side of things. And we're like, and it was actually, I'm trying to think who it was that told me. It was one of the funny car guys had told me, I'm pretty sure. It might have even been, it was Muscat. Muscat told me that Brodie's little daughter must have been watching the NDRC coverage. She's like, why do they keep calling my daddy a tuner? Like she's thinking that, like he's a fish.
yeah,
But that's the thing. We talk very much in industry terms.
Yeah.
yeah,
Don't we?
yeah.
Like, there's so much to it that it's I'll never understand drag racing because I'll never have the time to fully understand it to be where I probably should be without it. But there's so much in talk in drag racing. It's a very hard sport to get your brain around, which is probably why I feel like a bit of an imposter at times because I don't have that history. And a lot of people have lived their whole lives in this sport, like I have in Speedway. So, it's just a beautiful chaos.
It is a beautiful chaos. You sort of segued into what I wanted to segue into, Speedway. Talk us, because I want to share our ages here, but as a 10-year-old,
Yeah.
I remember you at Claremont Speedway. And this,
Yikes.
so 10. So I
Yikes.
was 10.
Thanks for that, Nick. That's great.
I was 10 or 11. I was 10. I might have been 10 or 11.
Tell me how
but
old you are, please.
I'm 50.
Okay, so that's not possible.
No, so maybe I was a bit older. Maybe I was.
Yeah, I'm hoping because you're not far off my age.
Okay.
So I'm 50.
All right.
I'm 54 this year.
All right. So maybe I was 14, 15, maybe, perhaps.
Yeah, I was like 17 or 18 when
Yeah.
I was at Claremont. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Oh
yeah.
God.
So-
Ooh, I can't listen to those tapes. I can't listen to those.
But I do. I distinctly remember you, and I even told Simon, you remember Wade as well
Yes.
from the Claremont days. Talk us through that period and what got you into.
Yeah, how did you get your foot in the door there?
So I've been commentating since I was commentating my Matchbox cars on my bedroom floor. So that's where I think it started. I had no dreams of being an announcer, but so I was born in Subi, and we lived in Mount Yukon until I was 6. My dad was in the Air Force, so I would go to the Speedway with my Nana and Papa and Dad, and Nana would fill out all the programs because Claremont Speedway's had a really amazing program. It was a
Yep,
proper magazine.
Absolutely, yes.
Wasn't just like a piece of paper, and
And
so
it had the heats.
Yep.
And you
Yep.
could determine from there who was going to be in the feature.
and you could write in, who was where and
Yep.
what the positions were, and so Nana and Papa would take my dad and I, and my Papa he was born on a farm lived in Carnamah. My Nana and Papa were born in South Australia, but they moved to Perth years and years later, and so Papa would get off the tractor in Carnamah and drive 191 miles. I know it was exactly that distance because he told me, and to Claremont on Friday, and then drive back, get on the tractor, and go back to harvest. And so he went like for 35 years or something. So when my dad got posted to Melbourne to Point Cook, Nana would keep sending me the programs filled out.
Excellent.
So I would, and Nana always said crazy things like, I would say to her, Nana, there's going to be a crash in this one. Or Nana, Mick McKeon's going to win this race or something. And she'd be like, oh, okay. And she said, quite often I would be right. Now, that's just the luck of the draw. It's not like me being Nostradamus. But so Mick McKeon and Dennis Nash and Laurie Hardy and Alf Barbagallo were my Mount Rushmores, So we went to...
Hang on. You missed Tony Matter in there.
Super Ding. Good old Super Ding. Well, I mean, Noel Bradford built,
Yep.
Dave, Ray Genevieve, the charge from Osborne Park. And Con was the one that built those heroes, superheroes, heroes and villains. And so I lived in Melbourne for 2 years, and Nana would send the programs. Then we got posted to Malaysia for 2 years, and Nana would keep sending the programs. So all filled out. So I could memorize all the captions from all the photos and, just the old down by the new, here's mud in your face, Robert Moore's leading Mick McKean in the WA title. It's still burned in my brain because I just read it over and over. And so we got posted back to South Australia and at Edinburgh. So we went there, lived there for 5 years, and we went to Speedway Park whenever Dad would take me. And then I kept thinking, Nana was still sending me the programs. I kept thinking, I can't wait to get back to Claremont and go to the Speedway with Popper as an adult, because I was literally 6 when we left Perth. And all I wanted to do was go with Popper again. So we finally got posted back to Australia, and then finally Dad got posted back to Perth. So I'm like, here it is. We're living on the Air Force Base in Bullsbrook, and it's about 3 weeks out the start of the season, and the phone rang at about 11 o'clock that night. And back in the day, when the phone rang that kind of time of the night, it was usually something bad. And I remember my dad saying, "It's all right, Mum. I'll be there in a minute." And so Papa had a heart attack. And I remember my dad getting in the car and just racing to Karrinyup, and he never got there. My Papa died, that night. And so I was obviously very moved by that. I was very close to Papa. And I wrote a letter to the editor of the program. Hey, dear Brad Thompson, my Papa went to Claremont Speedway for 35 years before he passed away, and he drove 191 mile each way. And, I was just wondering if you could maybe pay tribute to my Papa with just writing his name, Vale, George Aunger or something in the program. He went for 35 years. My dad and I will continue his tradition, and, yours faithfully. I'm a 15-year-old resident from Bullsbrook, WA, very mature. And we drove in the front gate of the first night of the new season, and I opened the program, and the whole letter was in the program. And my dad knew nothing about that, and neither did my nana. I said, "Dad, the whole letter's in there." He's like, "What are you talking about?" And I said, and I showed him, and you can imagine how emotional Dad was about it. And my nana cut that letter out of the program and put it in a picture frame with Papa on her TV till the day she died in her 90s. And so I went to the office that night to say thank you to the editor, and a nice blonde lady met me at the door, and she's like, "Can I help you?" I said, "Oh, I just wanted to meet Brad Thompson and say thank you." She goes, "Oh, why is that?" And I said, "Oh, he put my letter in the program." She said, "No, that was Con." And I said, "Con Migro?" Like I'm 15, and I knew that Con Migro was Mr. Speedway.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, like it couldn't got any better. I floated out of the office, And so I met Con one later in the season and introduced myself to him. And I was in year 10 at Eastern Hills High School. And my mate, I was posting back handwritten letters to my friend in South Australia saying, "Heat 4, Bert Vosbergen came from the back." And he's handwriting letters back going, "What are you sending me this for? You should be sending it to a magazine." And I was like, "Mate, I'm 15. Who's going to want a magazine article from a 15-year-old? And Ken Brown, who's a doyen of journalism in WA, he had every magazine tied up. And finally, Bill Meyer, a guy in Sydney from Speedway Star magazine, said, "I'll use your stuff." So I'm handwriting my articles called Western Ways and posting them, and he would get the photos from Peter French or Peter Roebuck and make this national column. So I didn't think I could get any bigger than that. My chemistry teacher was on a pit crew of Neville Lance's speaker, so he let me go through chemistry when I was flunking my ass off. And so Con offered me a job to edit the program, and then he said, "You want to come and commentate?" And I was like, "Yeah, I want to commentate." And I thought, where'd that come from? Because I never thought as a kid I want to commentate. But he said, "You got to go to Ellenbrook and learn." So I had to go to Ellenbrook, the winter track, and I worked with a man called Eric Dyson, who's an old sidecar racer, an Electrolux salesman. Big coat, and would smoke like a Rastafarian Christmas party. I mean, you'd walk in the commentary box, you could barely see out the window because Eric just like. But I learned to commentate 2 and 3 car races and stuff. It was tough. There wasn't much going on, so I showed up at Claremont 6 months later as a 17-year-old and sucked. But I had Chuck Redmond and Con to sort of guide me to try and be like them, because I was trying to be like them, which was a bad idea because they had powerful voices, like they could rip the paint off the walls, and I was trying to be them. So it wasn't until much later I learnt my own patter, but that's in a long story. That's how I kind of got started. And then Con said, "Do you want to work with me full time?" And I was like, it's like being offered a job at Disneyland. Like who gets that job, So
Yeah.
that was phenomenal. And it was a really powerful moment there where I used to get to run practice. The Con would let me run practice, and every Thursday from 12 till 2, they'd let teams come down and practice. And John Rudd from Channel 7 offered me a job doing the news reports for 7 Nightly News through that. And anyway, they had Bob Stevens, his name, from Cambaldo, and he was a sidecar racer. And we hadn't seen him for a while. And I said, Bob, good to see you back, mate. I thought you were scared, Oh, no, not scared, not scared, Oh, make sure you wick it up tomorrow, like get after it. Oh, I will do. Don't be scared. So first race the next night, I'm commentating him coming out of turn 4 and a bike stops in front. And he goes straight to the wall and he was killed like that on the spot. And that was before social media. So this was 1990. I'm going to say 91, 92. I'm really sorry that I don't remember that date. But Con came up in the commentary box. He said, now, Wade, young Bobby Stevens has been killed. You can't say anything. You just have to continue commentating. And all I could think was me having said to him the day before, don't be scared, don't be scared. Anyway, on the Wednesday, I went to his funeral, and there's his young wife and the young kids, and it was awful. And Barry Farley, one of the old sidecar badasses, came up to me and he grabbed me and he said, you got to distance yourself from this. And I said, yeah, Baz, all right. I wasn't paying attention. He grabbed me and he said, this is the shitty part of the glamour. You need to distance yourself from this. And I didn't understand what he meant. The next day we're at practice at Claremont, and the Headington brothers have a young guy that's trying out a solo. He comes off turn 2, tags the wall with his bars and cuts his throat from here to here. There's claret everywhere. We're screaming for the ambulance, the whole bit. And I went and sat up on the pits in turn 3 while the ambulance was trying to bring this kid back to life. And I put my head in my hands and cried. And Glenn O'Brien, big tough sidecar rider, sat next to me and said, hey, don't pity us. He goes, nobody puts a gun to our head and says to do this. Do not pity us. And he put his arm around my shoulders. And it was a really powerful moment when it's happened, unfortunately, for me a couple of times where I've commentated friends of mine who've passed away.
Yeah.
And you have to remind yourself that it's a privilege to do what we do, and they're doing it because they want to. No one says, Michelle, get in a race car or you're not going to have your next meal.
Yeah.
So long story short, that's kind of where I think I learn a bit of a balance for what I get to do and what people do that we get to talk about.
Yeah. No, it's
Yeah. It would be difficult when you're so passionate about telling those personal stories as well, though, and then to still try and keep that that distance so you don't become so
Yeah.
emotional yourself. But it would be you'd be a master to balance it.
Drag racing scares me. Since Sam got killed, it scares me. There's no doubt about it. We sit behind the start line for the Bend, and we sit behind the start line for Nitro Champs in Sydney. I sit alongside it for Willowbank, and I sit alongside it for the Motorplex, and alongside it for Darwin. And I prefer sitting alongside it because I don't like seeing how much they move.
Yeah.
It really has, and to tie Adam Brand back into all that when Sam was killed, I was very, very fortunate to be staying with Adam 3 or 4 days later. Flew back up to the Gold Coast to spend a couple of days with him, and that was just the way it worked out. And Adam said, "You going all right, Spruik?" I said, "Oh, I'm really not." I said, I don't know how to help this community that they've lost this incredible friend, and I feel like I should be able to say something or make them feel better or something. I don't know what to do. And he said, "Spruik, shut up and listen to this." And he just pressed in this track he had on his car. It was a song he was working on. And the name came up on the stereo and it said Our Church. And I thought, oh, this is going to be a song about God or, our cathedral, because Adam has written some really great gospel stuff. And he played this song to me and I just sat there. And it was literally like he'd written it about Sam Fennick 2 days earlier. And I go, "Spruik, croak." And he goes, "Yes." And I go, "Croak." And he goes, "Yes, you can use it." And I just was absolutely the universe lining everything up.
Yeah.
I rang Nathan Prendergast. I said, "Hey, mate." He goes, "How you going?" I go, "I think I'm pretty good." And he goes, "That's great." Because we're all in a funk. Like you have this incredible feeling of responsibility in a strange way. When someone gets killed in that world that you're working in, you feel like you're part of their workplace. And so I said to Nathan, I said, "I want you to listen to this, but don't play it in your car. Like get around a decent stereo and just listen to this." Anyway, he goes, "All right." So I flicked it onto him. And he called me back about an hour later. He goes, "Mate." And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Mate." And I go, "Yes, this is the song. This is what we need." And Adam's like, mate, we're not supposed to release this till February. But obviously it was that early January that, that Sam got killed. And he goes, take it. I don't care what my manager says. It's yours. Just do it. And Nath goes, shit, I'm nervous. I don't know if I can make a video that's going to do this justice. And of course, Nathan's like Rembrandt with that stuff. I had no doubt in my mind he was going to knock that out of the park. And that song just changed the whole environment around drag racing at a time it desperately needed it. And you would swear that song was written for Sam.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it was written 2 years before. It was about COVID. It was about mental health for men's mental health. Hey, we lost a brother, but we still show up and we raise our cup every time, And that was all just Adam having that sense of my mate needs this. Yeah. And I'm going, my mates need this. And then you can't script that stuff.
No, you can't. I honestly thought the song was written for Sam.
Yeah.
I didn't realise that was a...
Unfortunately, everyone that's listening to this didn't hear the half an hour before we started recording.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell everyone about your relationship with Adam?
So Adam, it's just one of those things you don't see coming. And Adam has this phenomenal ability to play me music that hits me right in my heart every time as a dad, or as a person. And you go, Spruik, I need you to listen to this. And you just send me something on my phone. I'll go, dude, how do you just do that? How do you feel like you just wrote a song for me? And it's got nothing to do with me, but it's so relatable. And so I met Adam 4 years after I saw him around because I was at Albany. And it was a country speaker round at Easter, I think. And it was a beautiful black quarter midget with a bright yellow number 5 and a beautiful brunette woman with long black hair and painted on jeans. And I was standing next to a friend of mine, Scott Glazebrook. I said, wow, who's that? And he's like, oh, that's Adam Bruno's girlfriend. I didn't even know who Adam Bruno was. And that was the last I thought of it. And you fast forward 4 years later, I'm in Parramatta, and the girl puts a phone through, Wade, there's a call from you. And the guy goes, you don't know me, Wade. My name's Adam Bruno. And I went, black quarter midget, yellow number 5, awesome looking girlfriend. And he goes, that's me. And he's like, I'm in Sydney. I've just driven my long reach ute across the Nullarbor to become a country music singer. Can I come and see you? And that's literally how, and he just knew my voice from being at Claremont back in the day. So I certainly didn't know Adam, but he rocked up with a packet of Tim Tams. We had Tim Tam bongs. Apparently not allowed to call them Tim Tam bongs. What do you call them now? Tim Tam...
Yeah, because when you first said this, I was like,
have you never heard of
I know you went to Eastern Hills, but what are we?
So, yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. That's when you cut off each corner of the Tim Tam and suck it.
Thank you.
So it
through
is,
a cup of tea or something.
It is just
they call it a Tim Tam slam now. How boring.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, you chew off.
Have you not done it before, Michelle?
No, I thought he was talking about something else when you say
exactly as you said, Nick. No, you suck. You bite one corner off the opposite corner of the Tim Tam, and you put it in your coffee, and you suck your coffee through the Tim Tam.
Yeah, well,
and it
when
goes...
you then went to repeat it while being on air, I thought,
No, I understood that. Like that.
I've never heard
times.
them be called that.
So you've not done that before, Michelle?
Yeah,
okay,
but I don't know what
She's
we've
a lady.
called it.
She's not a heathen like us.
I haven't called it a Tim Tam bong.
Well, is that what you know it as, Nick?
Yeah, I do, yeah. But I knew exactly what you were talking about when you said it. I said,
yeah, he rocked up with a packet of Tim Tams and and he won 3 golden guitars, a year later. It's the most phenomenal thing. I remember driving home with his album. He gave me the CD, it had the song Dirt Track Cowboys on that we put together. And I remember driving home. I've never met a guy that's actually made a CD. I drove from Sydney to Newcastle, listened to the whole album, and he called me, he goes, so what do you reckon, Spruik? I said, mate, that's amazing. Like, he shot Last Man Standing in the video at Gidgee Gallup. The old, there's an old shop on the right-hand side and you head towards through Gidgee, and I'm trying to think of the name of the store, but it was all shot around there. And I said, there's just one song I don't think it's really going to work. He goes, what's that? I go, just Grandpa's Piano. I'm not really big. He goes, oh, really? Huh, that's going to be like our second single. We got big hopes for that. I was like, oh, well, went straight to number 1. Like Last Man Standing, number 1, Grandpa's Piano, number 1, and then Dirt Track Cowboys went number 1. I was just like, where's this bloke been? Just incredible.
I remember that Dirt Track Cowboy song really well. So tell us, when we spoke about this before, tell us about that song and how you got to Hey Hey It's Saturday.
Oh gosh. So So Adam, the reason he called me up was because he had an idea for a song. And I'm just like, a minute ago, I didn't even know who he was, apart from he had a hot girlfriend who then became his wife in the end. Anyway, he was living in Lane Cove, which is a really nice suburb, not
Yeah.
very far from Parramatta, and just in his 2-bedroom unit with Anne-Marie. And he would do the same thing I would do at Claremont. He would come and sit in the stands at Parramatta during the week because he just liked to be around the Speedway. Like it was, and I would do that same thing at the Royal Show every year. I'd just sit at the Royal Show and just sit on the back straight and look at the track like a weirdo. But it was such a special
the
place
same
to me.
spot.
Yeah. And so Adam would do that at Parramatta. So he rolls down with a blank cassette. So cassette, Michelle, is like this thing that used to be before CDs.
I had a press and play
You did?
recorder when I was younger
Thank God.
that I would had my own microphone to.
Thank God. So he's got this. He's like, oh, I've got this song about sprint cars, and I've written the words and stuff, but I want you to commentate instead of a guitar solo. And I said, wow, that was pretty out there. I don't think anybody had previously done anything like that. I was like, are you sure? Yeah. My manager thinks I'm crazy. He's already got the guitar solo ready to replace you, but we'll do this. So we go up and sit in my car, which I think was, and now I think about it, I think it was an EL Falcon or something like that. And we put the old cassette in there. And he goes, now this bit here, instead of a guitar solo, this is going to be you commentating. And I'm still trying to get it. Like he's like, this ain't no Hollywood Star Wars. It's the real deal, open wheel, dirt track cowboys. And I want you to just do stuff here. I was like what? I really couldn't get my brain around it. And he said, don't worry, I don't need the answer today. But soon I'm going to need you to put in whatever time frame this is and just start thinking about it. And we became really good mates and we started playing indoor cricket together. And some of the indoor cricket players were Speedway guys. So there was Troy Jenkins and Darren Jenkins. And if you know Adam's song at all, there's a song called I Did What? And I called Troy Jenkins to see if he survived. Adam used a lot of Speedway names in his songs, over the years. He's a diehard one of us, right? So he's definitely a motorsport guy. And so he said, oh, I want you to put in Adrian Marr and Kelly Linigan because he got to become friends with Kelly. But other than that, do what you like. And it had only been 6 months earlier that Daryl and Jason Cricky had been killed in a car accident. And I got to be part of their service, and I actually announced their last lap. It was all around the Speedway. The hearse was in the back, and they had their sprint car on a tilt tray, and they did a really slow reverse lap. And the Crickies asked me, would I announce that lap? So that to that day, this is still the most profound thing I've ever done. And so I thought, well, I want to mention that one's for the boys. So I want to have some, and I was trying to look at a way of lifting up my friend Ron Cricky because there's nothing more devastating than losing a child. And please don't let me ever experience that. And so I wanted to lift Ronnie up a bit, and I wanted to tribute some people. And obviously you have to mention Gary Rush when you mention Speedway. So we just went down to a studio in Botany, down to the airport. And Graham was still, his manager was very well spoken. Yes, I'm Graham, and I'm Adam's manager, and didn't like Speedway necessarily. Didn't know what it was, and he was like, I could tell he was like very, we'll see how this goes. Like he had the guitar solo ready, and so Adam puts me on the other side. I put the headphones on, and we just did a level check. And a level check for people that don't know is where you make sure you don't blow the microphone levels off. So they'll do a little, oh, Michelle Morrison in the left-hand lane up against. And then they give you one where you go, oh, Michelle Morrison in the left-hand lane. So you don't peak out the system. And I just messed around. So Con Margaret always said, Friday night is Speedway night, the national capital of speed. And, we've heard that for years and years on the radio. And David Landon, my boss in Parramatta, would always have his cigarette. He'd go, if this doesn't turn you on, you haven't got a switch. So I just thought, I'm just going to mess around and make those things together and make this level. So I just went, if this doesn't turn you on, you haven't got a switch. Friday night is Speedway night, the national capital of speed. Sit down and hang on. Here come the dirt track cowboys. And that was just me messing around. Now, that wasn't supposed to be in the song. Later on, they went, that's the perfect intro. Let's just use that. Somebody goes, do, and into that. So I had my little bit, had to make that thing fit. And I just remember Gary Rush, the living legend of sprint car racing, fires his 700 horsepower six-seater down the back straight, pushing the cushion, and I just made it up. But I knew some touch points, and it just fitted. And at the end, I went, oh, yeah, that one's for the boys. And then he's Dirt Track Cowboys came in. And I was looking through the window and Adam is bouncing around the studio, slapping. He's got Graham by the shoulders and Graham's still looking at like, what just happened? And the engineer's like, yeah, good, I can see that. And I'm going, is that all right? And Adam is just, because he knew, it was his vision.
Yeah.
So he knew. And I remember thinking, that was really cool, but I didn't think anything of it. Didn't think anything would come of it. And yet it went to number 1. It's the 3rd single we had on the album, went to number 1. And then we went to Gympie and played at the Gympie Muster, and I did it live because Adam goes, you got to see this. People sing your bit. And I go, what? He goes, mate, people love it. They'll do your bit. So I remember accidentally, every now and again, I would change it to Friday night at Speedway night at the Castle, RSL or something when we were at. And people come up later, don't change it. Don't change it. It's like your favourite band changing the lyrics, right? And I didn't realise. I thought, I'm just being relevant.
Yeah.
But so we did that, and then Adam says he played on Hey Hey It's Saturday. He did Last Man Standing, and he said, hey, they want you to come back and do Dirt Track with me. And I said, oh, come on, Adam. Like, give me a break, Croak. Because I'm telling you, they want to do it. They want to put a sprint car in there. And I was like, are you serious? So I got Max Stumsney to put his sprint car on there. I wore Skip Jackson's skilled Pennzoil crew shirt because it was cool. And my boss, David Lander, was really shitty at me. He's like, why would you wear a Pennzoil shirt when you got a Valvoline sprint car on this? I was like, I wanted to make sure everybody was like, right? Yeah. So we did Hey Hey and Dirt Track Cowboys. And it just became this anthem for Speedway. So whilst Matt Cornell was the guy that wrote and created Our Church, who's Adam's bass player, now plays bass for Lee Kernigan. Adam and Matt collaborated on Our Church, but Adam brought Dirt Track Cowboys. So Adam has had this really deep, and he's my eldest boy Liam's godfather, and he's just had this really deep connection with me since the day he first rang me up and said, you don't know me, my name's Adam Bruno. It's one of those friendships and brotherhoods you can't possibly explain, but when I watch him sing the Anzac, if you've ever seen one of his chances, he sings a song called the Anzac and let's stand for that man they call the Anzac. And you can't help but cry. Like, it's just the most incredibly patriotic. And every year, the Tamworth Country Music Festival ignore him and give awards and golden guitars to people. I go, are you serious? Adam's music has evolved so much over so many, and I get shitty. I'm like, mate, and Adam goes, it's all right. It's all right, Spruik. Just it's like, no, it's not all right. Like, Our Church should have been Song of the Year for its impact on the planet, as well as how great it is as a song. And it just got brushed over as collaborative of the year. And I was like, I get a bit shitty. Sorry. I get shitty. He's my brother, you know.
So much passion, but for good reason.
Yeah, that song, Our Church, just changed people's, still people like Kim Reed, Bruce's wife, Kim, and Julie Reed and stuff like that. When we talk about it, they get emotional,
Yeah,
It was just the
100%.
right thing at the right time. That wasn't me. That was Adam realizing in that situation this could be a really good help.
Yeah, I remember hearing it for the first time, and because was it at the Winter Nationals that then they played it, and with the video?
No, they did that at the they did that in Sydney 3 weeks later when they had the Sam Fennick tribute race.
Yeah.
And because Nathan asked me would I do a little video as well for that, just to address everybody. And I'm just really grateful I had that chance to meet Sam in that instant before that, because and I was checking through his old messages. I found all his old spam messages in my Facebook Messenger that you don't see, and I was like, oh my God, there's probably 500 of them, and one of them was one of Sam's sisters, and she just said, thank you for the way you spoke about Sam, and it was just like, God, it's a moment in time, but it's someone's whole life that I just caught a glimpse of in his smile. So if I hadn't been in that trailer that day, I hadn't gone seen Fab, so I get my regular ass kicking and my my jokes at my expense
Just throwing
from
your
Fab.
banter around.
Yeah, I wouldn't have experienced that. So that's why I think a sport's about people. It's cool, 11,000 horsepower, badass. What she drives is badass. You can see that, but it's her little girls that are so sassy. It's Trent. It's his dad. It's that community. What we're doing here. That's its true value.
Complete mix of personalities and seeing those relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, talk us through that while we're here. The methanol moonshine. Talk us through that. Are you?
So that's another random thing. Very random. That was in COVID.
Yep.
That was in COVID. So 2020, my mate happens to own a gin distillery in Mildura. And ironically, all my live gigs just disappeared. Like everyone's
yeah.
jobs suddenly, it's not exactly what you call what was the word that they had where liquor stores were still able to open? What was it called? Something industry, like a vital industry, like a
Yeah.
necessary,
Yeah.
and certainly announcing wasn't on that. So I was riding my bike somewhere, just out around the house, and Steve Timmis rang me and said, "What are you doing right now?" I said, "Not a lot." Like thinking, how am I going
Schedule's
to
clear.
survive here? And he's like, I want you to promote my vodka to the Speedway audience. And ironically, Steve's vodka was called Stay the F at Home Vodka because it was designed to be mailed out, right? So
Yeah.
it was literally called Stay the F oblique CK at Home Vodka. And he's like, I'll give you a discount code or something. You promote it and push it out, and I'll give you a clip. And I was like, let me come back to you. I thought, vodka's not really a Speedway drink. We don't really have a drink, but vodka's not it. So I went back to the next day. I said, mate, can you make moonshine? And he goes, mate, moonshine's just unmatured whiskey. So of course we can. It's like
Yeah.
whiskey, he was already making it,
Yeah.
and you just don't leave it in a barrel for 5 years. You just,
Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
cordial.
It's ready to go.
Like what your husband was drinking today. It's just mix it and drink it, right?
Well,
He
we
drinks
did have a bottle.
That was cordial, wasn't it?
Yeah.
He drinks cordial. No judgment, Trent. No judgment.
I mean, hang on. It was 10 o'clock in the morning. Let's give him a little bit. Or was it 9 o'clock?
No, by that time it was 11, but the bottle was almost gone.
I mean, we're in a bar.
True. But I said to Timo, now we should talk because moonshine has got the NASCAR heritage, right? Running on the beach. And I like alliteration. So I like Michelle mauls him in Mandurah. Nick nails him in Narracourt, like that kind of thing. So I like alliteration in my commentary and in my writing and all that stuff. And I said, what about if we call it methanol moonshine? And Timo's like, yep, sure, let's do that. Not even thinking that people would think, don't drink methanol, it'll kill you, because that comes up occasionally, people outside our sport. And we were sitting there just brainstorming some ideas, and he had a bottle of Prohibition gin next to him. And inside the gin bottle was these old blokes with beards and, an old Prohibitioner photo in the label. And I said, well, that's pretty cool. He goes, what about if we put sprint cars inside the bottle? I said, what? How are we going to do that? He goes, there's a printer here in town. It prints our labels. Let's just see if you can put a sprint car inside the label. And so we went, can you do that? And he came back and said, yeah, we can do that. Let's just do it. So we planned, this was in March, and we said by August or something like that, let's have this ready. And in June, on June 8, on our respective birthdays, we launched Methanol Moonshine, the first bottle of it. And it had Gary Rush's car inside it. And a story on the back, and it blew people's minds because no one had seen a race car inside a bottle before. And it was pure fluke. It was just two guys getting together, and two Geminis. If you're into astrology, we're both Geminis. Got to keep 20 balls in the air to keep creatively satisfied. And that is where it started. And it was like, then we created a Methanol Moonshine Legend every month, and we had a new bottle, and it became a collector's series. Then we went to the idea of a flavor. And in this time, within the first 6 months, Kendra from Knoxville Raceway said, we have to have this in America. I was like, oh, shit, we can't just mail 24 bottles of moonshine to America. We can ship it in Australia, but not externally. She said, I want to give away 24 bottles to the A main starters in Knoxville. And I was like, shit, how are we going to do that? So I had to apply, firstly, for someone to make it for us. And I couldn't get out of the country because Australia was locked down.
Yeah.
So it was like, this is never going to work. Anyway, I was talking to someone randomly about it, Brooke Tatnall's car owner in America, and he said, I want to do a tribute car with Brooke, but I want you to help me, and I don't want to tell him about it. I said, yeah, okay, cool. And he goes, are you doing that Methanol Moonshine thing? This guy was based in Iowa. And I said, yeah. And he goes, wow, that's cool. I said, I want to try and do it in America, but I don't know how we get started. And he goes, you'll need to have a distiller in Iowa if you're going to sell it in Iowa. I'm in the liquor industry. What are the chances, right? Let me see if I can find you a place. I said, oh, okay. He calls him back in a couple of days. He goes, hey, you need to call Amanda from Century Farms Distillery in Spencer, Iowa, and talk to her about it. She knows she's expecting your call. And I rang her up. I said, g'day. Can you make moonshine? And she goes, well, we make whiskey. And I said, well, whiskey is basically what we're making anyway. And I said, this is what we do. This is what I'm calling it. She goes, I'm going to tell you now, you're not going to get the name approved federally for methanol moonshine because if you Google it, right, they're going to say it kills you if you drink it. So I was like, well, I really like the name and I think it sticks and we want to keep it consistent. So can we apply? She was like, oh, I'll apply for it. But we had Dirt Track Moonshine. We had all these other names in case it didn't fly. And I had to, at the same time, apply for a visa to leave the country. And my friend Lockie McHugh's mum, Sharon, said, just mention the word export, that you're trying to export a product out of Australia to America, and the Australian government will look at giving you a dispensation to leave. So I've applied for this thing online, and it was probably a week, and Amanda called me back. She said, you're not going to believe this, but they've approved the name, Methanol Moonshine. I said, wow, okay, that's cool. She goes, yeah, it's cool. And then later that day, the Australian government emailed me saying, you are granted permission to leave to do this, but you will be responsible for your own travel insurance, your own flights. You'll have to quarantine when you come back, all those things. And so Kendra from Knox was like, well, you're coming to present this, so we need to make this. And I was like, shit, if we make it for the racetrack, for the drivers, the fans are going to want it. Or then they're going to say, well, if you're not making it commercially, then someone else is going to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
So we're like, shit, we're going to have to make this. And this was like a month left. So I said to Amanda, what do we do? Can you make this? She's like, yeah, we can make it. And then Kendra went across the road to the Hy-Vee in Knoxville, the liquor store, and said, this is going to be a thing. You need to stock it because the fans are going to love this. So suddenly we had a ready-made supermarket liquor store that was going to buy it in Knoxville. So I was like, shit, we better do this now. And so we literally produced a bottle for the A-Main starters and we produced a drinking bottle for the public. And suddenly we had this incredible little distillery in Spencer, Iowa, punching out bottles of whiskey called Methanol Moonshine with sprint car labels. That was 4 years ago now, 2021. And I was stuck in there having to fly back. I was only going to be there for a week. And I rang my partner in the business, Steve, and said, I don't know what to do. Do I come home? And he goes, mate, don't come home. Mildura's locked down. You're just going to go home to your house and not be able to get out.
Yeah.
Stay there if you can. And at the time, Australia was only accepting 2,000 people a week into Australia. And so looking at the airfares.
Yeah, the flights were ridiculously expensive.
15,000 US one way.
Wow.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
crazy.
And I was like, well, that's it. I can't possibly afford a $15,000 airfare. And literally I went to see my friend Tony Bockhoven, who was the announcer of Knoxville. He had his motorhome at the track. It was Sunday morning. I was supposed to fly home Monday. I said, mate, I don't know what to do, but if I go home, this dream could just fall over. And he goes, don't think about what 15 grand will cost you today. Think about what it will cost you in 10 years when you didn't do it. I was like, that's great, but I don't got the 15 grand. I get what you're saying, but I can't afford this. So I rang a friend of mine in Sydney. His name's Jamie Hall, who's a two-car speed car team operator and a telecommunications expert in Sydney with a big business. I said, can you help me? Because I can't get home if I don't do it this way. He said, sure. And he booked me my airfares on Singapore Airlines. Business class was the only way. There was 10 other people on the plane and flew me home. And I had to quarantine in Perth in the it's one of the hotels that overlooks the Wacker. It's like pretty close down that end of town. I'm trying to think of the name of it.
I think there was like is it Fraser's
No, that
overlooks the Wacker?
that's the Hyatt, isn't it?
I think
It's the old
the Ridges was one that did the quarantine as well. The
Oh,
Hyatt,
and the
Hyatt
Parmelia
more-
Hilton was one as well.
Yeah, you might be right.
Mm.
All I know is that you're off the bus with the mask, straight in the room,
Yeah.
knock on the door. You had to wait for 30 seconds and then you could get your food and bring it in. And
Yeah.
so it was a pretty surreal experience, but it helped me to meet people in Iowa and go to Boone and establish us at the Super Nationals. And we called it Methanol Boonshine. And I've been really lucky that I've been around great people that have always believed in me to just, oh, that's a crazy idea. Yeah, I'll help. Because without that, I wouldn't have, if I didn't have Nathan Prendergast pushing me back in 1999 to call more than Speedway, we wouldn't be sitting here.
Yeah. Yep.
So along the way, I've had these incredible people that have believed in me. Been very, very lucky.
That was the SBS days, wasn't it? Speedway
Yeah.
SBS. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
when Fab was running the very first Monaro, with Holden genuine parts on it. And
Yeah.
and I remember, being very, very unsure of what I was doing. I was just alongside Nathan. Nathan was such a guru. I was the Darryl Eastlake and he was the guy that actually knew his shit.
Yeah. But talk us through that if you don't mind. The SBS does Speed Week.
That was
That
grouse.
you recorded. That's post production. Yeah.
Yeah, look, a lot of the times it was, and it confused my nana, my beautiful nana, because she moved over to Goulburn to live with my auntie, and she lived in an old people's home, and I would show up and say, "Hi, Nana," and she's like, "Oh, I saw you on TV in Tasmania the other day," and I was like, "Nana, I was actually in Sydney calling that." She couldn't get her head around that most of what we did was, in the Lavender Bay in the studio there, and so because Nathan pushed me, I ended up doing offshore powerboats, supercross, superbikes, truck racing, rally. Obviously speedway stuff when I could, but drifting, production cars, like power tour. And it was the coolest thing that happened to me was Nathan said, "I've kind of got an audition for you." And it's a bit of a strange thing. I can't tell you too much about it, but it's going to be a guy come down and sit with you, and you're just going to call this thing on screen, but I want you to do it like there are no rules. I was like, okay. So I sat down in front of the monitor, and this guy came in and sat with me, who later would become one of my great friends and amazing mentors. And there were 6 utes on the track at Amory Park, and that was the start of the Brutes, the V8 Brutes, and that became the Australian V8 Ute Series. And I just called it crazy and had fun with it. And Craig Denyer was the guy's name.
Yeah.
Grant's father.
Grant's dad,
Yeah.
yeah. And I didn't realise I was auditioning to be the voice of the V8 Ute Series.
Yeah. Okay.
And that was a phenomenal part of my life. It was so much fun because there was no politically correct bullshit. Everyone had a nickname. There was Charlie Handlebars Kovacs and Grant
Yeah.
Mad Dog Denyer
Yep.
and the Hustler Jack Elsgood. And there was a Jesus car, Andrew Fisher. So every time he came out, I was like, Jesus, how good's this? And there was Raj Sharma. And every time I'd say Raj, and my co-commentator go, like a tiger, like a tiger. Because there was nobody being, hurt feelings or anything like that. It was just fun. And it was like Ford fans and Holden fans. And so that sort of begat, and that's where I got to announce with Daryl Eastlake. And that was one of the most surreal experiences because Daryl was just such a genuine, humble person for a giant like that. And I remember we had to do that sound check thing, and it's like, Nate's like, all right, give us a sound check. And I'm like, oh, wow, check this out. And he goes, all right, Daryl. And Daryl goes, oh, he's absolutely huge. And I was like, God, that's Daryl Eastlake. Because he was a giant. Wasn't he like Wirewater Sports?
Yeah.
And he was that hype guy. So I got to work with Alan Jones, Formula One. Alan Jones, commentating with him, and Richard Crail and Matt Nolte. Everybody that really got anywhere came through Speed Week. Greg Rust, Mark Osler, Lee Diffie.
Yep.
All of those luminaries in broadcasting all went through AVE through Speed Week.
Yeah.
So as much as some of the stuff was like, God, offshore powerboat racing was hard because there's only 6 or 7 of them, and it was like, but it took me to so many incredible places and to call stuff and to, people still say to me, I remember when you were on Speed Week. I'm like, I haven't called on Speed Week consistently for 20 years. But it's still an iconic show.
It is, yeah, most certainly. It's huge. It's still, it's a regular staple too. Sunday afternoon if
Yep.
you're not much on or you're not doing
Yep.
anything.
1 o'clock till 3 o'clock. Yep.
Yeah, you go to SBS and
Yeah.
and there it is for you. It is quite incredible. Did you ever get to work with Mike Raymond then at all?
Yes.
What was that like? Because he's, for me,
Yep.
like there's a handful of guys that I look up to, and
Yeah.
Mike Raymond's one of them. Yourself is another, and Aaron Noonan is another one
Yeah,
as well.
Noonan's awesome.
Noons, I love Noons, but
So the Mike Raymond thing is complex because if you go back to 1995, I was in the pits, walking through the pits at Claremont, working for Con, and Gary Rush was in there, and Rushy called me into his truck. I was like, yes, Mr. Rush. I was like, yeah. So I'm 24, and he's like, what are you doing next year? I'm like, oh, I want to go to America, Rushy. I want to try and, do some stuff over there. No. We need you in Sydney. I'm like, excuse me? It's like, no, we need someone like you in Sydney at Parramatta. And I sort of brushed it off, didn't think he was serious. And I had plans to go to Ohio and try to learn to and do some stuff over there. Anyway, I came back in 97 and worked for Con a bit, but Des Ferris gave me a job in Bunbury, so I worked full-time with him. And I was working both tracks, and come to 98, and David Lander said to me, I want you to come over and come to Parramatta and have a look at Parramatta. And I was like, oh, okay. And Tony Loxley and a few guys said to me, hey, you might get a job out of this. And I was like, I don't want to live in Sydney. Traffic sucks. I like Perth. I'm a West Aussie. And so David says to me, when you come over, don't tell anyone why you're here. I just want you to come and walk around and check the place out. And I said, oh, why's that? He goes, well, I'm probably going to let Mike Raymond go and you're going to have his job.
God.
Right, exactly. Absolutely. That's
And what were you thinking at that
Don's-
moment?
I was thinking,
At
that's the
24
voice.
years old.
That's the voice of Bathurst, right?
Yep.
The no hanky panky Valvoline Yankee, right? So Mike Raymond was a god in broadcasting, and so I flew into Sydney. David picked me up, and I remember we come out of the airport. We're on Parramatta Road, and it's just a standstill. Just traffic as far as you can see. And I said, has there been a crash? And David goes, what? He goes, this is Sydney. I was like, shit. It's like, you know how Kwinana Freeway can be now?
Yeah.
That's what Parramatta Road is 24/7. And so we went to his house. David had this phenomenal big 2-story house with an in-ground pool and an artificial tennis court and, you know, turf and the whole bit. And they said, just go tonight and just tell me what you think and just walk around. And I knew Lyndall Raymond really, really well. I got to meet Lyndall, Mike's daughter, at Knoxville the year before. And we were kind of kindred spirits because Lyndall was doing the same job at Parramatta that I was doing in Claremont. And we just got on really well. And she's like, oh, my God, what are you doing here? I was like, oh, just always wanted to come and check it out. Just thinking I felt bad because, you know, I didn't know what Mike's situation was at all. And he was announcing with Steve, his brother. So Mike and Steve Raymond, like Steve Raymond is an OAM. He's a broadcasting giant. So the two of them are the Raymond brothers. So I went there and walked around the pits and they had Gary Rush and Max Dumsney and Gary Brazier and George Tatnell and Brooke Tatnell. They had all the giants that we only got once a year at Perth. That was just a weekly show. And I sat in the crowd and I remember, you know, Mike and Steve were very polished, like TV polished. But there wasn't like that, where are the Gary Rush fans? It was very amazing delivery, but it didn't engage the fans like I thought that we were doing in Perth. And that's what David Lander wanted. He wanted that call and response. And I'm a huge Kiss fan, and that's where it comes from for me. You know, if you believe in rock and roll, would you stand up for what you believe in? So all that call and response, that's where I got my love of getting the crowd going. So I was like, it's very different. It's like TV. It's like Rush, Works turn 2. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful. They were so polished. And I was
Clinical. Clinical's the word.
but I was very rough, you know, and very, you know, excitable. And in fact, I think one of Steve's friends called me Jump About. That was my nickname, was Jump About. And so literally we go back to David's house that night about 2:00 in the morning. We're sitting in the kitchen and he's like, so I'm going to let Mike go. And it's like, right. Because I'm just become the most hated man in Sydney if I take this job. And he basically offered me double plus a percentage of folding that I was getting in Perth. And he went, so I'm thinking about this. And I went, it's about what I was thinking. Then I'm thinking I've got to move to Sydney and all those sort of things. So I get on the plane to go home and David says to me as he drops me off, I'd really like to buy a Newcastle Speedway. And I never thought any more of it. And when he picked me up 3 months later, he goes, there's good news and bad news. I go, right? He goes, the good news is I just bought Newcastle. The bad news is you're going to be very busy. So he switched Parramatta to Friday, and Newcastle's only 2 hours away. So we ran Newcastle Saturday and Parramatta Friday. So I was doing both tracks. But to complicate that, poor Steve Raymond was the announcer at Parramatta when Mike left by himself. And now I come in as the guy that took his brother's job. I really feel for Steve. It put him in a really horrible position because he still loved commentating. It's what he did his whole life. He commentated in the end for 50 years, Steve. And suddenly here's this loudmouth West Aussie. And I remember Steve saying to me the first night, sit there and talk when I say you can talk. Like he was very wary of me and completely understandably. And a lot of Sydney were like, hang on a minute, who's this upstart from Western Australia? And it took me probably a year or two to sort of work my way into that. And I really feel for Mike because he had to hate me for it. Like he had to. And it wasn't my fault, but that's the way that it worked out. And so I was always a little bit nervous about being around him if I ever was going to be. And it was a guy named Phil Christensen who promoted Supercross over here and nationally. And Phil said, so I've got a monster truck and Supercross show at the Rod Laver Arena and I want you to announce it. I said, yeah, cool. He goes, so Mike will be your co-commentator.
Oh,
And I said, Phil. He goes, I already talked to him about it. He's fine. And I was like, are you sure? Because I don't want to be that guy, you know? And he's like, no. Wade, I wouldn't ask you if I didn't think that he was okay with it. And to his credit, Mike was amazing to me. Like, and I remember just thinking, I'm the bad guy. I literally feel like I've run off with his wife or something. You know, it was just a horrible feeling. And he was really accommodating. And I was thinking, I got to work with one of the doyens of the sport broadcasting. And his brother Steve was amazing to me in the end. When he eventually realized that I wasn't there just to be this upstart, I wanted to learn under him and learn that craft. So I got to work with Mike and Steve Raymond, which is phenomenal.
Oh, I was just thinking, like, it's such an amazing story, but you came into that to be something different and
Yeah.
to be a new voice, and you weren't just doing your version of what they
No.
already were. You were seen as what you could do as an announcer and with those calling
Yeah.
calling lines. And so, of course, I think anyone, when they lose their job, you start to take it a bit personally.
Yeah.
But then once you can understand the vision of what they were trying to achieve, they wanted something different. And obviously, the brothers, they were doing something
Yep.
right to keep one half of the duo, but then to bring you on, you weren't a direct competition to them. You were something completely different.
Well, I kept saying it to David because in the end, I went to the infield to commentate on the flag stand because I needed to get away from Steve so that we could separate our roles. And they had a really cool, like a Meccano set flag stand on the infield that went across the edge of the track a bit. The flag wave was supposed to stand, and in the end, the drivers couldn't see the flag because it was too high. So Arthur would stand on the bottom, and I said to David, "Can I commentate on that?" And he was like, "If you want to." I was like, it just seemed to make sense to be able to have a different perspective, of what and the racing looks different out there.
Yeah.
You see different things. You see guys running out of tear offs. You see things in
Yeah.
the middle that you don't see on the outside. And so that role, and that's probably been something that I fell into the idea of because I just needed to get space between
Yeah.
Steve and I. And I remember telling the drivers, all right, so I've got a remote microphone. So that means if I come to you, I'm going to look for your signal. Are you okay to talk if you've crashed? Or let's not swear. Let's just keep it,
Yeah.
And it was quite funny because Steve Brazier, who's Gary Brazier's dad, is just an icon. Just a lovely, lovely man, but a bit of a badass. But doesn't speak much. Very rarely does he speak. But when he speaks, you listen. And Terry McCall, this American, had flipped Gary over in turn 2. And there's cars laying on this side. This is only probably the first month of me being on the infield. And Steve Brazier standing there looking like he wants to say something. And Steve at the time was in his 60s. And I walk over to Steve like he wants to say something. And I've said, Steve Brazier, what do you make of all this? And he goes, that guy's a fucking dickhead. And I went, all right, back to you, Steve Raymond. And I was like, oh, God. But you fast forward, that role was completely by accident just to get some space creatively for Steve and I. And so it became, that role was an infield role. So everywhere I went from that point on, it was on the middle. And there was one night at Speedway City and Robbie Farr was in an A main. He was leading. It was a red light. And I was standing about from here to you, Nick, and he's in the car. And I look over at him. I go, can we talk? And he goes, yeah. Because they got used to that idea of being able to do that. And I knelt down next to Robbie, put my knee on the clay. And he goes, before I turn the mic on, he goes, how am I looking? I go, you got uncovered. Like, no one's got anything for you. And I turn the mic on and go, Robbie, blah, 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 blah. And as I'm talking to him, I'm thinking, when I was a kid at Claremont, you never saw Con or Chuck or Des Austin or any of those announcers. They were a voice. You never actually could, like if they walked past you, you wouldn't have known unless you saw a picture of them because it was the voice, not the person that you saw. But the infield role became this visible, oh, that's the guy that's talking. And I thought, if you told me when I was 4 years old at Claremont that I could just walk out in the middle of a race and kneel down next to the race leader and ask him how he was going, that was one. I think if I look back on it, and it was accidental. I didn't think I'm going to become an infield announcer, but that's probably something that I'm really proud of that became a thing. And now infield announcers, not that because I did it, but I was one of the first people to do it because I had to.
Wow. That's so had you seen it anywhere
No.
before?
No, I did it. I tried it in America a couple of times when I was helping some people in Ohio with their racetrack at Findlay, and I would run to the accident and get a chat with them and then call back on the infield and stuff. And I remember a guy flipped, and I'm like, at what point did you realize that you couldn't save this? He goes, when I turned over. and the crowd all sort of chuckled like idiot, and it's like, okay, fair point. So, but it was such an insightful place to be
Yeah.
because you were so close to it. You literally saw and heard things that you couldn't have heard from the PA box, and the PA box was so sterile in retrospect.
Yeah.
So, and whilst I would love to do it from the floor with drags, there's so much information that you're having to process and those things you have to do. It's not really practical to do it any other way than the deep end and in the start area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I watch every one of our TV shows back before I do every round because I just have to. I don't trust myself to have that retention of the information that I need in drag racing. So it probably seems like I'm really unprepared, and to some degree I am because I haven't lived it my whole life. But I have to do that because I owe that role, that responsibility that I need to know. Hang on, Phil Reed ran a 372 before that, and before that it was a 379, and before that Noobs ran a 373 because it's such critical information. In Speedway, we really don't place emphasis on that. It's just who won the race.
Yeah.
Yeah, those number increments, it's just for anyone that can just hold that information and be able to recite that back and reference previous events. And
Yeah,
it blows my mind.
me too. Nolte does it, just like that. So does Nathan. They all do it.
Trent's huge.
Yeah.
Trent's huge on the stats. And you ask him about a driver and, do you know if this person? And he'll just be like, oh, yep, drives a such and such.
Yep.
ET of this time
Good
and
luck to
runs
him.
that, and I'm just like, but it really is like it's a skill because, and I think it takes a certain type of person because he runs that through all of the sports that he follows, and it amazes me. Such small increments of time or statistics, and he just
Well, I
it
have a
sticks.
huge ally in Kate from the Motorplex, who fortunately they take you to every round, thank God. Where she will print off every piece of paper that I need after every run.
Oh yeah.
I literally have to go through them. I don't just go, okay, so you're number 6 qualifier and you did this. I've got to reference it, then I'll take it back. All right, so it says here you ran this.
Yeah.
What's to go, Nick? Oh, we underpowered the racetrack that time. What do you mean by that? Okay, well, we did this because I just don't trust myself not to screw it up.
Yeah.
So, it's a team. It's a team. It's totally a team. The NDRC team, they're doing an amazing job. Andy is not a drag racing fan at all, Andy Lopez. He's he's an entertainment guy who owns the Summer Nats, who owns Motorex, who owns Rocky Nats, who owns Red Center Nats. He's an entrepreneur and a promoter, but he's not a drag racing fan. I think he's more of a fan than he used to be, but he's not like Nathan, who's lived it his whole life, So we have some really good people around us.
But so, when you say that he's more of a fan than he used to be,
Mhm.
do you think that, because in my mind, I'm connecting the dots, do you think now Andy sees more of the, inside relationships and those personal stories? Because
Yeah.
if you can say, oh, look, I've watched drags, not a fan,
Yep.
but then once you're actually involved for one reason or another, or your knowledge has expanded, then you can find other ways to really be connected and
Yeah.
grow your love and passion.
I guess he kind of has to be, but as well now he's going to have to start because the 7+ deal as well. That's such a huge part of the sport now that we hang our hat on. That the sport of drag racing really does hang its hat on.
Not just that, the fact that we're on free to air now.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That is, I think that's one of the biggest things that's happened in the last 10 years for the sport.
Well, Andy's great because he loves Tex, like Tex Griffiths, for example. Like he knows that the sportsman guys are as important as Nitro Funny Car, as Door Slammer, as Fuel, as Top Fuel Motorcycle, Pro Stop Motorcycle. So Andy came to me a while ago. He's like, oh, you seem to like doing these Facebook Live things. I said, I love it because it helps me to understand the story better. And he's like, well, what about if you do it for us, like the deep end? We'll call it, what do you want to call it? So let's call it the deep end because that's where all the stories are at the other end. And so that's when I meet like Tony and Debbie Frost, and I go, I want to talk about the breast cancer battle that they're going through. And I want to talk about Adam and Luke Reed because they're third generation working on their dad and their uncle's car. So Andy just lets me go, and so does Nathan. Nathan's just like, mate, you just keep doing what you're doing. Just tell the story. Andy has to deal with the business aspect of it. I don't think that's fun. I think they butt heads a bit with the teams over, payments over not who's getting paid, but how that works. Like Nitro Champs, I think was a phenomenally expensive exercise when you've got like 7 or 8 Group 1 categories, and then you've got all your sportsman competition as well. So I feel sorry for Andy because he's got to deal with the business of it as well as I just get to roll in. And when people say, "Oh, don't tell me, I don't want to know." If you think don't want to know. I want everyone to roll through that tunnel that I see and go, "How good's this guy?
Yeah.
Look at what
Yeah.
he's doing." Because I don't want it soured. As much
Yeah.
as that's sort of weird, I don't want my perspective. And all I can do is treat people how they treat me. And when I first met Michelle and we just got talking, at the Motorplex, and I looked around at what she was doing and her family, I thought, what a great story, like, I know the Dax really well. So, suddenly there's is Miss O trying to run her own car and trying to convince Marty and JD that they should be running Door Slammer more often, with Elise. The more people I meet, the more I love what we do. And Andy doesn't have time to do that, and neither does Nathan, because Nathan's so committed to his Supercar TV role that I'm probably just lucky that I get to mix and then try to convert that,
And I think there's also a little bit of, hesitancy to show too much face for Andy as well, because,
Sure.
like we saw it ourselves at the Perth Motorplex when Daniel and I can't remember the name, his uncle, Gary's brother, came and ran the track for a year, and suddenly you think there's someone in place now to make change, and now
Mark.
let's just Mark Miosevich, apologies there, but let's just flood them with all of our ideas, and it becomes a bit of that, like, you're always going to disappoint someone.
Absolutely.
You're not going to, your visions aren't
Mhm.
going to align with everyone's. And so when you say that you kind of need to stop people in their tracks sometimes if they start to speak in a negative way, it's like when you are in that business role, you're bound to
Yep.
cross some unhappy people. But I think the most important thing is that, like, the end goal vision, and what's your end goal vision, and if that end goal aligns with everyone, then whatever's happening in the middle is the part that needs to be either negotiated or explained, so then you
Yeah.
can see their point of view.
Yep. So there's a shared commonality in it.
Yeah. A high tide lifts all ships.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important for Nitro to be successful. There's no doubt that Nitro, when you advertise a Nitro category, particularly fuel, that there is an uplift of interest and a surge in the concept. I'm personally really fond of door slammer racing. I just love the landscape.
That's the West Aussie in you.
Yeah, for sure. Look, for sure. I mean, but when you look at it, Ronnie second year, Lisa second year, Russell second year, Brody first year.
Yeah.
Then you got the old legend like Zap, and you got Daniel Gregorini that fits, and you got legends like Peter Kapiris, and you got these wild-looking Corvettes, but it's the competitiveness of that category that I think I love the most. But I often say to people that Daniel and Lisa Gregorini, I think, are the most saleable product in Australian motorsport.
Yeah.
Where do you get a husband and wife where quite often the wife kicks the ass? Sorry,
Yeah.
Daniel.
I talked about this quite a few episodes ago. Remember, I started rattling off some
Yeah.
brand names.
Yes.
I don't know, I came up with some oddball ones, but I agree 100%. I think they are, Lisa in particular,
Yeah.
is really marketable, and it hurts me, it kills me that we don't see that on the car. You know what I mean? I think there's so many Australian companies, not even Australian, international companies that have a really good opportunity with someone like Lisa.
Yeah,
to-
you know, they're always talking about equality, and our sport has always had that. And I think that's
Yes, you're right.
why we don't get it, is because we've always had it, or else we should have the money in the sport back into women.
I think part of it, and I think Daniel and Lisa will quite honestly tell you they don't have the skill set and the time to market themselves as well as they would like to.
Mm.
And I think that until you have a marketing company that wants to come in and say, all right, let me understand what's going on here. Okay, Lisa, everyone on your team is a woman. Interesting. Okay. And Daniel, everyone on your team is a guy, but you're a husband and wife and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So now I'll try and position you in the marketplace. So Daniel and Lisa, and I had a meeting with the Door Slammer guys in Sydney and said, you guys are the best pub band in Australian music, but you deserve to be playing stadiums. because right now they're all so busy running their own cars that no one's got time to think about how we market beyond this.
Yeah.
Like that side by side with Zap and Brody at the Dragway at the Bend had hundreds of thousands of views,
Mm-hmm.
and it should. That's one of the coolest things I've ever commentated. When those guys, and I said to Nathan on the field, I was like, quick, get him as they go to come under the tunnel, because the two are sitting. It's like, is that double vision? Like they
Yeah.
identical looking Monaros that are, and there's two most iconic cars in WA Motorsport is the Ricciardello Alfa Romeo sports sedan
Yeah, 100%.
and Zap's Rat.
Yeah.
And I've said to Zap so many times, I just want to put those two cars together and photograph them at the Plex.
Well,
wanna
we can
Yeah,
make
sure,
that
we can
happen.
make that happen quite
100%
easily.
we can make that
I
happen.
want to put
Yeah.
Basil's Alpha and Zap there like that and go, this is WA icon.
Yeah, Tony will be up for
Yeah.
that for sure.
Yeah, I
For
think
sure.
so
We
too.
can make that happen.
We need to do it. I want to put them together and do that. So
You work that in
Mm.
with the moonshine there, the methanol.
well, Zap is one of my Legend Series bottles. We did a bottle for Zap with his car inside it, with a really, really cool Richard Hathaway picture inside it. I just think that people are so caught up in, look how busy you are, right?
Yeah.
You're a mum of two, you got a race team, you got your own career rolling, you got so many balls in the air with what you're doing. Do you have time to market yourself as well?
No, but I think the other thing is that, like, for Zap, he's got his now wife Robbie,
Yeah.
and they were
She
only
loves it.
yeah, they've only been married for a few months now, but she's been really working hard behind the scenes with his marketing and promotion
Yeah, she
side of
has.
it, and I think that's where it's like it's really hard to blow your own horn, like you guys.
Yeah.
Every single time I come
You're
into
right.
the studio, you guys are trying to give me some credibility that I've lost in myself. And, the confidence that I've had just being around people that actually, give you a good shake and say, hang on, but you did this. But then it's still just so hard to then turn to someone else and be like, oh, look, I've done this. And I try to. And so when you came up and met with me at the Western Nationals, and you said, "Oh, tell us about it," and I tried to say, okay, for people that haven't seen me race, that are new to the sport, haven't seen me race for being 7 years out of the car, what are the points that they should know? What are they going to know
Yeah.
about my racing and my achievements? And because I wasn't planning on doing. I didn't do any national
Yep.
travels for last season. I was like, okay, this is my time to lay my achievements down with my national championship in 2015. Yet, I'm quoting it 9 years later, and my national record. That's the moment to say it. But it's there's the part of you that thinks that
So that's called imposter syndrome.
yes, 100%.
Mm.
Yep.
I get it.
Yeah.
I feel it every day when I turn the mic on in NDRC. I think there's people here that should be doing this job. I really do, and I've talked to you about that before.
Yeah.
There's that I haven't lived this sport like people live this sport, and I feel like, what am I doing here? So I completely understand and that's why I want to tell people I'm not a drag racing announcer. And there'd be people going, no shit, but I'm a storyteller, and I love that when I stand next to Julie Reed, if her dad's Stan Sainty Cup is near her, she'll cry, because she's still so incredibly proud and so heartbroken that Stan isn't still around her. That to me is worth any 368 from a human interest point of view, because no one can
Yeah.
understand what it's like to do 500 kilometers per hour.
Yeah.
I said to Sarah Lamatina, 0.00001% of people do this or would want to.
Mm.
So it is such a superhuman thing to stand there, and all the Lamatina kids are standing there watching Dad climb into that thing. And they had a really scary situation in Mildura just recently, where they had a nitro explosion and hurt one of their new rookie crew members, young teenager from Robinvale. And so it reminds you of how incredibly volatile and dangerous this sport can be. So that's what I just want to say. People, you don't get it. You need to go and come down and meet Lisa. Come down and meet Russell. Come down and meet Newbie. Newbie will make you laugh. Meet Phil. He'll make you laugh. Damien will make you question what you necessarily wanted to ask in the first place. But I love that he's the he's the IT nerd of the thing, but is very razor sharp. I miss Pete Gibris. I hope he comes back, because he had a real element of class about him. But there's so many great stories. You know how BT does Roaming Brian?
Yeah.
Whenever we get an oil down now or something, I go to Nath, can I please go down on the floor?
Yeah.
Because I know that there's Brooke Rapasada and there's Jess Turner and there's Kim Reed and there's Julie Reed and there's, there's Robbie now, Robbie Zapier, and there's all these great stories, and Stu Rowland, and it's taken a while to learn those people, but
Yeah.
that's the cool bit. Race cars are cool, people are cooler.
Yeah, the other thing too with our sport is the numbers are just so extreme that people can't comprehend. And when you say 11,000 horsepower,
Correct.
500 kilometres an hour, a sedan that's going 400 kilometres an hour, the numbers are just so big that it really is hard for, the average person to get, what does he mean 11,000?
You know what
I
we
mean?
should be doing too, Simon? We should be encouraging, and I have to think of this more often and remind myself, and it's hard sometimes when the place is full, like Willowbank will be next week, right? Is you need to sit at the start line for a run, and then you need to go down the end and watch it
Yeah.
then. Because we're also used to the boom and watching them leave, but you miss the shock and awe of them coming past at what 500 looks like. And that's why at Darwin, we hear them.
Yeah.
And then the race is finished, but we are sitting here and they finished over there. So you actually get that and you go, it's not until you have a point of perspective that they pass. It's almost like if the grandstand could move and the cars stayed still.
Yeah.
Wade, the best part, and this is what I like to do if I'm taking someone down that's never seen Nitro before.
Yep.
We'll do the start line thing, then I'll take him to the end of the track.
Yep.
You see the header flames, you see the butterfly open, but you still hear the idle.
Yeah.
And the sound catches up at about the same time as they go past. It is the most incredible thing.
That is amazing. With Top Fuel, I always take the kids. I said, let's top end, or at least try and get down there once for one session.
Did your school teacher ever do that thing where you learned about how sound travels? How
Yeah.
that would be at one of the oval and they'd bang a bin lid and go, you'd see it go, and then you hear bang.
Yeah.
And you're like, holy shit. Like
we must have had the same teacher.
Well, Graham Cowan was telling me this the other day from Rocket. He's saying the coolest part is after you've done a run, you stand down the deep end and you watch the next pair of cars come and you hear that. And you go, did I just do that?
Yeah.
Like that's when they realise,
Yeah.
and GC's a phenomenal individual. Like
Does so much for the sport.
Goodness me.
Incredible
He's in his
guy.
80s now.
Yeah.
And he's just built the Rocket Superdome, the new building, and shifting it into a new building. And he's 80 and he's building an industry still that he won't see maybe for another 10 years.
Mm.
Like, wow. Whew. But
Yeah, he's the Connie Coletta of Australia.
Definitely.
I'm sure looking
I
at me
hate
going,
to-
who's Connie Coletta?
I hate to do this, but we've gone over.
Sorry about that. Sorry
No,
about
but this has been such a great discussion. Really enjoyed the time. Just briefly tell us a bit as well, Wade's well, the Wade's well.
Yeah, Whirl, yeah.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about
With the
that.
accent.
Just
Yeah. Well,
YouTube channel?
Yeah, I've just been sort of noticing that I need to sort of maybe focus on telling more people about telling the stories.
Yeah.
And I'm not comfortable with it being on me. I know that people think I'm probably a wanker and needing the attention. I like to turn the attention to this lady. I like to turn the attention to other people. So I like being the storyteller, but I don't want it to be about me. But the brand helps me a little bit. If people don't want to wear a Methanol Moonshine shirt, which I understand, thank you for. I'm not yawning like Trent.
It's my mic in the way.
But it's so it's more me just trying to push my brand a little bit so that people will see more of the podcast or the YouTube stuff or the merch range. And it's kind of funny because I think the Speedway people have known me their whole life are going, what's he doing with the drag racing? why is he making a drag racing, hoodie and a t-shirt and stuff? But kind of have two loves these days.
Yeah.
On that point, we were having a discussion about this a couple of weeks ago.
Yep.
I've been around the drag since I was a kid.
Yep.
And I've found that drag racers will, watch footy, they'll watch NASCAR, they'll go to the Speedway, we like all the things. We might be diehard drag racing, but we'll watch the other stuff.
Yep.
But the Speedway tends to be a little bit more focused just on the fans.
Yeah, I think it's a fair call.
Yeah, we need to explain that to Gavin.
I think that's a fair call, but I will honestly and openly say, you have to see a fuel car leave the line.
Yeah.
Like I tell all my friends in Speedway, I'm a Speedway fan, been a whole life, but there's nothing on the planet that compares to watching a fuel car and feeling a fuel car leave the line. And when we were at Dragway at the Bend, and also at Sydney the year before, we had just like a test session that we didn't have to call. And Nathan was like, "You want to call this?" I said, "No, I want to go and stand on the floor between them again and remind myself of why this is special." Because it's really easy to be on the, in the top there in the booth and watching it and hearing the concussion on the window,
Yeah.
but you have to experience that. So sprint cars, solos, speed cars, late models, yep, hell yeah, sidecars, all of it. Till you see a fuel car or a funny car leave the line, your life is not complete.
You
No.
know, I feel like we've all seen, they've shown it so regularly, the cup of water that they'll put on
Yep.
on one of the walls at the side of the track, and you can see the vibrations ripple through the water. I had for, my first experience just at the Top Fuel event that we had at the Motorplex at the Western Nationals, and Danny had given Cleo a balloon, and Luna's crying because hers has floated up into the air. Um, but Cleo was holding on. We were like, pull down your helium balloon, hold on to it so you're not blocking someone else's view. And so we're holding on to this balloon, and the
Oh,
vibrations through it,
wow.
I thought that the balloon was going to pop. I was holding on to it, and I
Never
was like,
thought
oh
about
my
that.
gosh, is this? I thought it was going to explode and pop in my hands, and I'm thinking it's going to pop right into Cleo. But it was surreal. I was amazed. I still am amazed
Wow,
just
I hadn't thought
talking
about it
about
that
it.
way.
It felt like it was going to explode. It's crazy. Probably if
Oh.
it was inflated a bit more, it would have.
Look, and all of us, we all go to the speedway. We get it. The
Yep.
sprint car racing, it's incredible
Yep.
how close they are. But you're right that the being there face to face with a nitro deal, a big show nitro deal, is just unbelievable. It is.
I feel like a traitor to my Speedway background, but there's nothing like a fuel car or a funny car leaving the line.
You can't deny that power, but it's understandable why that power can't be in Speedway.
Oh,
you need to
yeah.
turn corners.
And Phil Reed always tells me, if you can turn left, you're not going fast enough. That's what Phil always...
yeah.
Felipe always says, I like sprint cars. He's great friends with Max Dumsney.
Yep.
But he's like, if you can still turn left at the end of the straight, you're not going fast enough.
But can I ask you this? If you took the commentary element away from the speedway,
Yep.
and just had the cars going around without, you guys hyping it up as opposed to two fuel cars or two door slammers going down the track, in your opinion, does the commentary make the speedway a bigger thing?
I think when Con was, in that era when Con was around, for sure, that whole slip, slide, dip and dive, a paralyzing burst of beat, as he chases the champagne, the glory and the gold, the soundtrack was what made that infinitely more relatable. And Con was always so good at the multi-millionaire businessman from Osborne Park. Everyone was a multi-millionaire, Con had this incredible way of painting.
Alf was the...
Yeah. He actually legit was. So I don't know.
I think of it when I'm watching the Speedway and the sprint cars, like at TV on home, where I can hear the commentary,
Yeah.
to when I'm actually on track and at the track, and when I'm watching it in the grandstands at the Motorplex, quite often you do have to focus on one car.
Yep.
That you can't see what's going on with the rest of the pack behind them. And so then when you're watching it at home and you've got that commentary, obviously there's the camera angles too, but that commentary is then drawing your focus to which specific cars or
We had a
what
fashion
battles
magazine.
going on.
We had a fashion magazine, WA Style, it was called, come to Claremont in the 90s. And they wanted to do a magazine story on the Speedway, night at the Speedway, culturally. And they had these incredible photos that were grainy and, very, very artistic, And like one of the track workers, David Jackson, always wore this terry toweling hat, and it's like the track worker had a rotted terry toweling hat, matted to his, wet forehead. And they likened the infield of the Speedway to like an aircraft carrier with all these bizarre signals that the officials had with torches to let him in and out and stuff. But they said this incredible line, and this is the best way to leave what we're talking about. They said Speedway fans read a race like you or I read a book. And I thought the amount of times I've stood next to someone and go, Figlamini's coming on the top. Look at the bottom working now.
Yep.
Right? So drag racing people analyze every foot of that pass. The fans that are occasional fans just go, oh, wow.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
they will break down. They'll look at the linear curve or the throttle and the whole thing. And Speedway fans are exactly the same. So it's the fans that make both sports what they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Wade,
Thanks for having me.
thank you
Well,
for
where can we
Thank
find
you.
you first?
Yes.
It was amazing.
Where can we find you?
Manage 'em up this weekend.
Yeah.
Yes.
Manage 'em up 15,000. So just Wade's Whirl, not world, like whirl, like a whirlwind, which is kind of appropriate, on Insta. And just Wade Aunger Photography. I love photography too. I've got a bit of a passion for photography.
We had it
Still.
in the notes, but we didn't
Didn't
get there.
get there. It was blown.
bullshitting
I
too
believe
much.
we blown 2 hours tonight. But it's
Sorry about that.
just went like that. No, it's been quite enjoyable. Wade,
Absolutely.
we've certainly enjoyed having you. Michelle, thank you for organising
Yeah,
Wade to
thank you,
come on.
Michelle.
I
Oh, it's a
really
pleasure.
enjoyed
She's an
that.
absolute rock star. I love doing
She
anything I can
is.
with her and Trent, with
It's
the
been
yawning one.
amazing. He really is interested. Don't worry, he yawns all the time.
Poor old Trent's
There's more
confident.
stories.
Oh,
Never
yeah.
gets a chance to defend himself.
Does it?
No, I'm sure I've told the story how he fell asleep on our first date and the second one.
It
yeah,
takes
so
a special.
I'm sure you haven't,
He's been
Michelle.
working hard.
Oh, it
You want to
was
edit
hard.
that out? Nick?
He needs to hear it. Enough is enough. No.
On that note, we'll bring this one to an end. Simon, thank you as well. Thanks for coming in, and we'll see you all in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.